Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 309. Chapter 309. The stories, the prisoners, and the marshal's baggage train stopped at the village of Shemshevo. The men crowded together round the campfires. Pierre went up to the fire, ate some roast horseflesh, lay down with his back to the fire, and immediately fell asleep. He again slept as he had done at Mozax in the Battle of Borodino. Again real events mingled with dreams, and again someone, he or another, gave expression to his thoughts, and even to the same thoughts that had been expressed in his dream at Mozask. Life is everything. Life is God. Everything changes and moves, and that movement is God. And while there is life, there is joy and consciousness of the divine. To love life is to love God. Harder and more blessed than all else is to love this life and one's sufferings and innocent sufferings. Karatsiev came to Pierre's mind. And suddenly he saw vividly before him a long-forgotten, kindly old man who had given him geography lessons in Switzerland. "Wait a bit," said the old man, and showed Pierre a globe. The globe was alive, a vibrating ball without fixed dimensions. Its whole surface consisted of drops closely pressed together, and all these drops moved and changed places, sometimes several of them merging into one, sometimes one dividing into many. Each drop tried to spread out and occupy as much space as possible, but others, striving to do the same, compressed it, sometimes destroyed it, and sometimes merged with it. "That is life," said the old teacher. "How simple and clear it is," thought Pierre. "How is it I did not know it before?" God is in the midst, and each drop tries to expand so as to reflect him to the greatest extent. And it grows, merges, disappears from the surface, sinks to the depths, and again emerges. There now Karatsiev has spread out and disappeared. "Do you understand, my child?" said the teacher. "Do you understand, damn you?" shouted a voice, and Pierre woke up. He lifted himself and sat up. A Frenchman who had just pushed a Russian soldier away was squatting by the fire, engaged in roasting a piece of meat stuck on a ramrod. His sleeves were rolled up, and his sinewy, hairy, red hands with their short fingers deftly turned the ramrod. His brown, morose face with frowning brows was clearly visible by the glow of the charcoal. "It's all the same to him," he muttered, turning quickly to a soldier who stood behind him. "Brigand, get away!" And twisting the ramrod, he looked gloomily at Pierre, who turned away and gazed into the darkness. A prisoner, the Russian soldier the Frenchman had pushed away, was sitting near the fire, patting something with his hand. Looking more closely, Pierre recognized the blue-gray dog sitting beside the soldier, wagging its tail. "Ah, he's come," said Pierre, and he began, but did not finish. Suddenly and simultaneously a crowd of memories awoke in his fancy, of the look Platon had given him as he sat under the tree, of the shot heard from that spot, of the dog's howl, of the guilty faces of the two Frenchmen as they ran past him, of the lowered and smoking gun, and of Karatsiev's absence at his halt. And he was on the point of realizing that Karatsiev had just been killed, and just at that instant, he knew not why, the recollection came to his mind of a summer evening he had spent with a beautiful Polish lady on the veranda of his house in Kiev. And without linking up the events of the day or drawing a conclusion from them, Pierre closed his eyes, seeing a vision of the country in summertime mingled with memories of bathing and of liquid, the vibrating globe, and he sank into water so that it closed over his head. Before sunrise, he was awakened by shouts and loud and rapid firing. French soldiers were running past him. "The Cossacks!" one of them shouted, and a moment later a crowd of Russians surrounded Pierre. For a long time he could not understand what was happening to him. All around he heard his comrades sobbing with joy. "Brothers, dear fellows, darlings!" old soldiers exclaimed, weeping, as they embraced Cossacks and Hussars. The Hussars and Cossacks crowded round the prisoners. One offered them clothes, another boots, and a third bread. Pierre sobbed as he sat among them and could not utter a word. He hugged the first soldier who approached him and kissed him, weeping. Dólokhov stood at the gate of the ruined house, letting a crowd of disarmed Frenchmen pass by. The French, excited by all that had happened, were talking loudly among themselves. But as they passed Dólokhov, who gently switched his boots with his whip and watched them with cold, glassy eyes that boded no good, they became silent. On the opposite side stood Dólokhov's Cossack, counting the prisoners and marking off each 100 with a chalk line on the gate. "How many?" Dólokhov asked the Cossack. "The second 100, replied the Cossack. "Filet, filet," Dólokhov kept saying, having adopted this expression from the French, and when his eyes met those of the prisoners, they flashed with a cruel light. Denísov, bareheaded and with a gloomy face, walked behind some Cossacks who were carrying the body of Petya Rostov to a hole that had been dug in the garden. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 309 of War and Peace. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 309. Dream is destiny. Today Pierre has another dream. Like his dream after the Battle of Borodino, it blends real events inside its dream sphere and features a disembodied voiceover narrator. It is worth considering in full. Life is everything, life is God. Everything changes and moves, and that movement is God. And while there is life, there is joy and consciousness of the divine. To love life is to love God. Harder and more blessed than all else is to love this life and one's suffering and innocent sufferings. Karatsiev came to Pierre's mind, and suddenly he saw vividly before him a long-forgotten, kindly old man who had given him geography lessons in Switzerland. "Wait a bit," said the old man, and showed Pierre a globe. The globe was alive, a vibrating ball without fixed dimensions. Its whole surface consisted of drops closely pressed together, and all these drops moved and changed places, sometimes several of them merging into one, sometimes one dividing into many. Each drop tried to spread out and occupy as much space as possible, but others, striving to do the same, compressed it, sometimes destroyed it, and sometimes merged with it. "That is life," said the old teacher. "How simple and clear it is," thought Pierre. "How is it I did not know it before?" God is in the midst, and each drop tries to expand so as to reflect Him to the greatest extent. And it grows, merges, disappears from the surface, sinks to the depths, and again emerges. There now, Karatsiev has spread out and disappeared. "Do you understand, my child?" said the teacher. Here in this passage, we have many of the novel's themes as they relate to Pierre's story arc. The impenetrable, ever-changing chaos of existence, the confounding nature of unjustified and ceaseless suffering, the presence of an inscrutable yet personal God. The waking life events following Pierre's dream confirm the truth of its message. He opens his eyes to the sorrowful terror of captivity. The brutality of man is on display as a French soldier mistreats a Russian prisoner. Then, just like the fluid globe of his dream, Pierre watches his fortune change. Denísov and Dólokhov arrive, liberating the Russians and subjecting the French to imprisonment. Perhaps the most insightful portion of Pierre's dream, however, is the narrator's final question. "Do you understand, my child?" The answer, of course, is that Pierre can never fully understand. Neither can we. Not really. Our answers must nearly always be aspirational. Cosmically, like the narrator says, we are mere children, small and uncomprehending. Our knowledge a mere conceit. Our quintessence a feeble and fugacious morass. Like Pierre, then, we must remember Platon Karatsiev and his execution. we must keep in mind Platon's good humor and enduring affection. For if the law of life is misery and suffering, we must be criminals and know that comedy ransoms misery and love murders suffering. Daily meditation. We are weak, watery beings standing in the midst of unrealities. Therefore, let us turn our minds to the things that are everlasting. Let us look up to the ideal outlines of all things that flit about on high, and to the God who moves among them and plans how he may defend from death that which he could not make imperishable, because its substance forbade, and so by reason may overcome the defects of the body. Seneca, Letters from a Stoic. All right, so that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 309 of War and Peace. Thanks so much for joining me. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. Links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow we're going to be reflecting and reading on chapter 310 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.